Hey guys, if you're shopping for knives and gear, make sure you check out the description of the video you're watching right now for links to some great online retailers. There's also individual links for knives that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review / knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Cheburkov Strihz. Small. Very, very beautiful, very stylish looking knife. There's a lot of good aesthetically here. Thanks so much to NAF Sergeant for sending this in. You can check out his YouTube and his Instagram by basically just typing in this information here. So thank you so much for sending this in for review. Thanks so much to my generous patrons who are supporting me right now. If you'd like to check out my Patreon, there's of course a link for Patreon right down in the description. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. When I unboxed this knife, people followed my link and they saw that Blade HQ had listed it at $700. No, this is not a $700 knife. It's an expensive knife, but no, it's not a $700 knife. I don't know why they have the out-of-stock listing at $700. You can actually find this, I think, still at Lamina, and periodically you can find it from Russia with Knives. So you can check those out. I'll still link it down below so you guys can get additional information from the listing at the website at Blade HQ where I have it linked. But no, it's not a $700 knife. Let's go ahead and do some measurements on this guy. There is a large and small version of it. I've got the large one here. We'll show it here in a sec. Overall length of the Strihz, or at least that's how I'm going to pronounce it, 7.5 inches overall, and the blade length is coming in at about 3.3 inches. Cutting edge is coming in at exactly 3.25. This is going to hit the nail on the head perfectly for a lot of people. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1. Rat 1, you can see there. It's definitely not as big as the Rat 1, but you can't call it a small knife. I'd call it a medium-sized knife. How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and Para 3? Get these two in here real quick so you guys can take a look. We're zoomed way up, so I'm squeezing these guys in here. There we go. And let's go ahead and do size comparisons up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the little brother, the Mini Griptilian. So there you go. A little bit longer than the Mini Griptilian and a little bit shorter than the full-size Griptilian or Ritter Hogue. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check on this guy. Get out my tools here. As per usual, my tools are very recommendable. You can find them down in the description. Here's what's odd. So I'm going to tell you guys right now, the handle screws are T6. Come on now. T6. This pivot, I kid you not, is a T7. Is that bad? No. It's just weird. I mean, this is one of the only times I've ever used the T7 bit. I know people are thinking, oh, you're just not getting that T8 bit in there. No, I'm telling you, that T7 is snug. This is a T7 pivot. So there you go. It's minimal on the hardware. I must have... When did I eat tomato sauce? Sorry, my thumbs... some sort of red sauce in it. Yeah, minimal hardware, right? Unfortunately, we have a free spinning pivot. We're going to talk about that later. Minimal hardware, though. Just a couple of screws down here holding in the back spacer. They're T6. If you're going to disassemble this, it's a frame lock. It shouldn't be difficult. Just be wary. Those heads are... they look like actually titanium hardware. Possibly these are just heat-treated steel screws, right? But they are potentially titanium. I'm honestly not sure about that. I suppose we can check. It's got a liner in there, but yeah, I think the hardware is titanium, actually. I'm not getting any... Oh, the pivot is steel, though. So that's interesting. I'm getting no magnetism at all on this hardware down here. Heavy magnetism on the pivot. All right, so there you go. Let's go ahead and do carry profile up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see here, not a thick knife. It's actually coming in just a little bit thinner than the Spyderco Para 3. How about length and height up against Spyderco Para 3 and PM2? Yeah, the profile on this is very, very good. We have an overall length that is honestly just a little bit shorter than even the Para 3, and definitely shorter than the PM2. Nowhere near as tall as either, and considering, you know, it's thinner, it just is going to yield a better overall profile. Now, there are different versions of this. I found one in my Carta for a little bit less money. This one's in full titanium. I've got one over here to the right, which we actually didn't compare to. Let's put it up against the Cheburkov Strihz Large. So the Strihz Large, you can see, is taller and has a taller blade and is a little bit longer. But I think this is a good large and small. A large and small that bothers me is like the full-size Griptilian and the mini Griptilian. Full-size Griptilian is like, you know, exactly the right size for me, and then the Griptilian is just way too small. This is pretty big and kind of medium-sized, which is a better way, in my opinion, to do that. Obviously, it doesn't yield the best legal outcome for everybody, but I really appreciate the sizes they decided to go with there. But anyways, yeah, there's different materials, and there's one different size. I think that the large comes in carbon fiber, so possibly there are ones floating around out there that are in carbon fiber, and the smaller size is just something you're going to have to look around and check out. If you haven't gathered, this is a Russian-made knife, and finding detailed information on it is difficult, but I've got enough to put my review together. Let's see here. Did we get through every... Oh, we need to talk about weight. Let's go ahead and measure the blade stock thickness here real quick. Blade stock thickness on this guy, I'm going to guess is maybe 125 thousandths, maybe 135 thousandths. Yeah, it says 137, 136 point. I'm gonna say it's probably 135 thousandths, which is fine. It's in medium territory, and the blade grind is pretty good. We'll talk about that here in a sec. On the inside, this is titanium. It does have a steel liner, a countersunk liner. That definitely is steel, by the way. I made sure and use the magnet on that guy. It does connect all the way down here. Obviously, no need for a liner on the other side. Sorry, let's get some more light so you guys can actually see what we're looking at. No steel liner on the other side, right? Not that it needs it. But overall, yeah, there's just not a lot here that's going to create unnecessary weight in this guy. So, weight, 3.5? Yeah, 3.35, which is right on the money for the blade length ratios, right? Do with that information what you will. This is going to be a pretty easy knife to carry. Just be aware of your local laws. All right, let's go ahead and talk about the anatomy of this knife. This is beautiful to me. Honestly, they kind of have this antique theme going on. This very simple, straightforward, kind of stylish antique look, right? We have this antique bronze. We have the pivot, which is curiously polished on top, and then the sides of it are bronze. I don't know if that's on purpose or if Naf Sargent did that himself. I don't know. But you can see it's carried over to the thumb studs. I'm going to say it looks like it's intentional. It looks like, you know, it's kind of like what happens with Chris Reeve knives. You guys see that blue anodized thumb stud and it starts to wear away, right? Or maybe Naf Sargent has just used it so much that that has started to be the case. I don't know. It doesn't seem that used. So it kind of looks intentional. And honestly, whether it is or not, I think it looks good. Whether it's something that will just happen to your knife over time because of where you're putting your hands. Because if you don't know, anodized hardware, eventually, if your hands are always all over them, anodization on titanium, it does wear away over time. Either way, it kind of looks good. The finish of the blade has kind of an antique look to it. We're going to talk about that. Same thing all the way around. The whole thing just looks really nice. And on top of that, we have a very minimalistic look to this thing. We have no texturing on the handle. We have a simple, straightforward handle shape or profile, and same thing with the blade. It's very simple. That's the name of the game with this guy all the way across the board. Simple, you know, in terms of like the logo, very simple. And then just on the other side, it just says M390. Cool. This is running on bearings. They do have versions of this knife, at least the one that I've got here. This guy is actually running on phosphor bronze. We'll talk about the larger one in a different episode. But the action on this guy is phenomenal. The positioning of the thumb stud makes it to where you absolutely do not need a scallop, or you don't need anything right here to sort of be able to access it. There's just plenty of access. It's easy. There is no thumb stud on the other side, so no reverse flicking unless you're left-handed, in which case, yeah, you can definitely do that. So if you want to reverse flick it and you're right-handed, just hold it in your left hand and do that, I guess. But, you know, okay, I can kind of understand, I guess, why they didn't put a thumb stud, because this side is not cut out as much as this side. This is cut out just a little bit more so that you have access to that thumb stud. But honestly, fidget factor is still here, and as you can see, it is very nearly completely and totally falls shut. If you get it at exactly the right angle, it actually will. The action is high quality. It is not just, you know, we got bearings in there and it's loose enough to where it'll fall. No, actually, Very smooth, very consistent. That's what I look for. No bumpiness, no lumpiness, anything like that. It's nice. I like that. Ergonomically, oh yeah, fantastic. I mean, there are just enough, there's just enough here in terms of, you know, a wave or sinking and rising in the handles to where your hands will fall into a natural position about right here, and the jimping extends out to a natural place for your thumb to rest, right? But I still feel like I've got freedom. If for whatever reason I want to choke back or choke up just a little bit more, there's not an uncomfortable way to hold this knife. I'm actually pretty happy with it. These corners are just a little bit sharp. It's mainly this right here, but honestly, there's not really a, yeah, you know, because of how I'm going to hold it in any natural position, honestly, I'm not coming in contact with those areas. And on the inside here, these edges, these are nicely knocked down. Same thing with up here. It's great. It is an angular drop, right? But it's not done in a way to where I notice it a whole lot when I'm thinking about using this continuously, right? And squeezing on it. No, it's not gonna bother my hands if I'm not wearing gloves. So that's nice. I can't really complain about it too much. Man, I like how the hardware looks. It's just beautiful. The whole thing looks like it could be a brand new item, or it could be something that's been around for half a century, you know? It just looks good. Even the stop pin has this aged bronze look to it. And honestly, I get the same vibe from the large one. It kind of looks pre-aged. And I don't know, that's going to appeal to some people and not so much to others, but I like how it looks. And I think, honestly, if this was a different profile, if it wasn't such a simple look, then maybe it wouldn't be the right theme. But because we have such a simple profile, such a simple look to the knife, minimalist look, I think it works, right? So here's the part that I'm confused about. This finish here is, it looks like maybe just a really, really light tumbling, but it's so fine-grained and even. I mean, I don't even know what to call it. I used to call it cloudy day. I've seen vapor blasted finishes that look similar. It's definitely not bead blasted. The end result here is that we have some slight discoloration. I thought initially it might just be fingerprints, but after repeatedly wiping off the blade, I found that no, there's just a little bit of discoloration or inconsistency. Now, you could look at that as it's just a continuation of the same theme. We have this sort of aged look where we have some discoloration in certain areas, right? The lighter satin finish, it looks like maybe it's worn away, and then the darker sort of aged bronze. Could look at it like that. On this side of the blade, it's perfect, right? You have kind of that kind of foggy, right? There's very, very little inconsistency and discoloration. It just has that nice sort of aged or pre-worn look to it. On this side, we have this one area right here where it's exceptionally dark and then heavy contrast as it continues out there. It's a little lighter. I noticed that, and I thought that's got to be a fingerprint, right? It's oil from hand. No. So, I don't know. That one area bothers me just a little bit, and maybe that's just the product of the finish. Maybe that's just a result of how they do it, and that's intentional. I'd really like it to look like this side. This side of the knife is just gorgeous. Holy cow. It's really nice. It's very consistently inconsistent, right? It has that aged look all the way across, and it's perfect, right? And then you just have this one area where I'm like, oh, darn it. But, I mean, I can't come... Here's the thing. The Vulcan finish that Medford offers is exactly that. It is wildly inconsistent. You have massive contrasts, right? So maybe I'm complaining about something, and maybe I've locked into something that's not an issue. It's just for whatever reason my brain's like, oh, I want it to be like the other side. But I have no idea if it's intentional. Maybe it's a product of the finish. Maybe the finish is designed to create a patina like this. I don't know. What's the blade steel? It's M390, so no matter what's going on with the blade, you really shouldn't have to worry about corrosion. I think that that's probably a perfect choice considering the profile here. Fully flat ground. Man, you see a lot of fully flat ground blades when we're looking at Russian knives, but you know what? I like it. Behind the edge, nice and thin. This is an absolute task doer. You're not going to have an issue with drag with this knife. You're not going to have an issue with anything. This is very, very versatile. We've got a nice drop point blade. It's very simple and a lot of people will call this boring. I like boring, actually. The edge is done beautifully. It's consistent. There's a nice sharpening choil back here. Beautiful. Really, really nice. A little bit, I guess, there's a little bit of inconsistency in the edge, a little bit of maybe a smile right there, but not that big of a deal. But yeah, I'm very happy with it. The corners up here, the back or the edge of the spine, the corners on the spine are nicely knocked down, so no issues there. It's beautiful. Really, really nice. I love how that the bronze, the other side of the thumb stud comes out right there. But anyways, I have no issues with the blade whatsoever. Moving on down to the scales, taking a look at this. Looks like maybe he's been carrying it a little bit. There's a little mark right there. So I don't want to judge too hard if he's actually been carrying and using it. The backspacer looks great. I got to be honest. I think I like that they've got just a plain version of this, but I think it would have been really cool if they had an area carved out right here. Not necessarily for an inlay, but just like if they just did a small area, a little patch right here, and they did some texturing, right? Just as an option. And then same thing if they had maybe a lighter bronze and textured backspacer, it would have looked nice. But it looks great the way that it is. I didn't see that, and it kind of made me think that'd be nice to have a little bit of busyness, but at the same time, this look has its own charm and appeal. Pocket clip, excellent. Goes right along with the theme of the knife. Very simple, very straightforward. It's one of those that has a hidden screw. So the screw is actually in here. Let's get my flashlight out. If I didn't say, you can pick up my flashlight in the description. Yeah, there's a screw holding in the liner, another screw that's holding in the liner, and then that screw looks like it's also holding in the pocket clip. And there's a pocket milled out for the pocket clip to rest in so that it doesn't wiggle. Areas right here look like they might be sharp. Truthfully, no. They're knocked down enough that it's really not going to bother people. And this is a titanium pocket clip, and you do have that continuous rise, which means it's going to rise to meet whatever thickness of pocket seam, right? So that's beautiful. And it is not a hot spot. It's perfectly flat and straight, so your hand just rests on top of it. There's no bill or anything like that. I think the pocket clip is just perfect for this knife. There's how much of the knife's going to be sticking up out of your pocket, right? Just not very much. Beautiful. This is a liner lock. This is something that I actually have come to really appreciate on titanium knives. Why? Because I found that during use, when I'm really squeezing a frame lock, I sort of impact the lockup percentage. Not necessarily in a negative way. I mean, that's kind of the design philosophy a little bit of a frame lock, is that the harder you're holding it, the more securely it locks up. But it also kind of pushes the lock bar over more, and I think in some extreme circumstances might actually affect the lock geometry. In this case, no, because all the pressure is going into the frame, and you're not really contacting the lock bar. Is a liner lock less sturdy than a frame lock? I don't know. I think maybe there's probably a way to measure it, but when I'm thinking about what I'm going to be doing with this knife, which is not anything ultra hard use, yeah, I don't really care. It's plenty strong, and there's no lock rock, there's no blade play or anything like that. It's very, very sturdy, and we're locking up at looks like 50%. Sorry, I'm shaking the camera all over the place. Now, I noticed the centering was just a little bit off, and I thought, no big deal. He's probably been using it, flipping it. I'll give it a little turn here. That's when I found out, number one, it's T7, and number two, it's free spinning. There's enough friction in there that I did actually get it to turn, and it came back closer to center. You guys have probably seen my video on the centering trick. If you don't know that, loosen up the body screws a little bit, loosen up the pivot, take a piece of paper, jam it. Like in this case, we'd want it to go back that way, so I would take a piece of paper and push it over that way and get it to really lean on that side. Then you crank down the pivot as far as you possibly can, almost to the point where it's over tight. Just be careful about that. Then you tighten down your body screws, then you pull the piece of paper out, and then you loosen up the pivot, and it should come back to center and still have nice action, right? But I decided I'm not going to mess with that because this is an expensive knife, and I don't want to slip and mess up the look of this. It's really nice. This comes in at almost $400. So I'm certain, given the style of knife that it is, and the fact that I have literally recentered like 100 knives using this trick, I'm not worried about whether or not it'll come back center. This is a knife that did not come absolutely brand new, so I'm not going to count it off too bad. It doesn't seem like it's really all that far off, so this should be pretty easy to do. I wouldn't judge it based on that because this other one is perfectly centered. The large one is perfectly centered. So, Fit and finish all the way around, absolutely excellent. The feel of it is excellent. This definitely feels like a high quality knife, and it is simple, and it is just titanium and M390, but there's a lot here that suggests that there's more that goes into this than something like a $200 to $300 Wee knife or a $150 Tucson knife sporting the exact same materials. There's simply more that goes into this. It's something that you can feel when you're handling it, and honestly, I kind of appreciate the look. So what does this knife cost? It costs $390. $320 if you find one in the micarta variant. Is this a $390 knife? Gosh, it's really nice, but for whatever reason, $390 just feels a little bit high. It's just one of those things where it's like, it's so hard. It's like, what do you mean when you say that it should cost less? How much less and exactly why? I'm not really going to be able to tell you that. It's just a gut feeling. This is really nice. It's really well done. And I have very few nitpicks with it, honestly. I mean, I'm like, why isn't that one area the same consistency of darkness, right? You can see here that those are fingerprints, right? So I can wipe those off. Right? And then we have that even sort of aged look, right? It's a little tiny nitpick. A couple of sharp areas. This area down here is a little teeny tiny bit sharp, really, but not that big of a deal. If it did come off center from the factory, that's obviously something that has to be addressed. We can't be spending almost $400 for knives and have them come off center. But I'm not going to judge that here because the other one's centered and these are both used. Honestly, this feels more like $350. I think if they had the micarta one coming in at $300 and this one coming in at $350, I think the price would be more on. So given the little nitpicks and the price, what it feels like it should be, right? And again, it's hard for me to say exactly why I feel that way. It's based on everything else that I've handled, right? This feels very similar to Riot knives that I've handled, right? And their sweet spot is, $350 to $450. This kind of feels like that. That's just my opinion. Can I recommend it? Yeah, I think it's a little bit on the high side for price. I mean, a lot of people who are looking at $350 knives won't shy away from $400 knives, right? It's like if you're shopping in budget territory and you're looking at a $40 knife, then an $80 knife is a totally different story, right? $40 difference. But if we're looking at a $350 knife and then you see a $390 knife that you're interested in, that's still a $40 difference, but it's not nearly the same impact, right? For people shopping in that price range. Just as you go up, the steps or the gaps between price become less and less of a concern until you're substantially outside of the original price point of the knife you were looking at. So can I recommend it? Yeah, if you can pick this up, if you find the type. Here's the thing, you got to really be into the look. If you really like the simplistic look of this, you like the simplistic profile, and in this case, if you like this kind of pre-worn or almost antique look, yeah, I think you're gonna like this. I think choking down an extra 40, or coughing up an extra 40, I think it's still gonna make you happy. You have to like liner lock knives, and you have to be into this exact shape. But man, this would make an excellent EDC knife. Just absolutely excellent. It'll always be a conversation piece because it looks interesting. It looks flashy in a subdued way. It looks very minimalist. And it functions well. I mean, this is obviously a luxury item. It's obviously a, it's a fancy piece, right? And it's going to hold up. I mean, the way that this is put together, it's absolutely going to hold up. Just a little bit on the high side. And honestly, my biggest complaint with this is the free spinning pivot. Why? No more free spinning pivots. It's 2021. This should never be a thing. That's just obnoxious. But there's enough friction in there that I can get it to turn. So that tells me the tolerances are really, really good. It's kind of like how Hinderer does their pivot. It's also free spinning, but there's generally enough friction in there that you can get it to turn. That's my thoughts. This is recommendable. It's expensive. It's going to speak to a specific audience, and it's not super available. You're kind of going to have to hunt it down. But yeah, if you can find it, go for it. Don't spend more than that on the secondary market. This is definitely not a knife that you want to be spending more than $390. It's already pushing it at $390, but very good. Let's see here. Thanks so much once again to Nav Sargent for sending this in. Be sure to check out his YouTube and his Instagram. And make sure to follow me on Instagram as well. That's going to be pretty much it today, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.